Thank you first for staying on for the last session. It was good meeting you, Michelle, at the speakers room. One of the things that we discussed, and we're throwing it out open to the audience, is rather than hold your questions to the end, if you want to, feel free to poke us as we go along, and we'll try to weave that into the conversation as we go. And one other question before we start is just to understand the profile of the audience here. If we can have the lights on, I would like to just see what is broadly the background. Are most of us here from a content creation, a production background? Okay. Any advertisers here? The guys who underwrite content are not here. Good. What about agency folks, the guys who place the advertisers' dollars?
Anyone who watches YouTube?
Okay, great. We'll try to broadly keep our conversation across three buckets. When we're talking about the future of television, we are actually looking at three people in the ecosystem. One is the audience, who's the main reason why we are here, right? And then there is a production company, content creators, and the third is the advertisers who kind of fuel this ecosystem, right? Michelle, if I can ask you first with what's happening in the craze in the world today about the Gangnam Style video, right? What exactly happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's incredible is I think we're now at 880 million views over the last 3 or 4 months, and it hasn't sort of peaked. It's still going. I think what's also extraordinary, and this is actually very, very representative of the way in which audiences build for this kind of content, is you've got an incredible number of parody videos. So we just did a search outside and we found 39,000 or 37,000 parody videos on YouTube. So one of them had 30 million views by itself. This was a parody of I think, Kim Jong-il doing Gangnam Style. But I think the whole point about something like Psy is really he's empowered a number of people to actually create their own versions, and that's fed on itself. I mean, I'm convinced that you might watch the original video 2 or 3 times, but you're not going to watch it 20, but you might keep going back to see what's the latest parody video that's been uploaded and go back and check it against the original. And so I think that kind of continuing to drive viewership back to the original video, but also extending beyond that. And I think that the way we saw that with another video by Guthrie. It was exactly the same thing, where Guthrie uploaded his original video, and then people really took it and owned it themselves and created their own parodies that, again, drove back to the original video. I think the other thing that's kind of extraordinary is clearly that viewership is not coming from Korea, even though it's in Korean. And so when you think about the ability of Psy to really try and get a global audience from Korea, it's really only YouTube or an online video platform that really allows, that gets rid of those boundaries and allows people to get a global audience for their content.
Interesting. I mean, my son wanted to see the Transformer Gangnam Style, and I said there won't be anything like that, but surely there was. And that's about today's audience, right? Historically, television content has always been delivering content in a non-return path way, if you will, if I can use the term. Mm-hmm. And with over-the-top systems that are coming with and internet content like YouTube platform, etc. how do you create content which the audience is able to find? How does this happen?
Well, I mean, I think that kind of going back to my previous point, I think the key thing is you have a potential of a global audience from day one. Right? So once you've uploaded to YouTube and you don't put any country restrictions or rights restrictions on it, it's going to anybody in the world that can access YouTube. And so I think that when you look at a content creator in Australia, for example, that might be pulling together an instruction on how to apply makeup in English, that video on YouTube can be viewed anywhere. And so I think that it really opens up the ability to really, again, think about niche global audiences. Mm-hmm. So it's not just, as I said, the people who can normally access you in Australia, but you're thinking about it as a global audience. So I think that the way that we sort of look at the potential of YouTube, it's kind of in a number of ways. One is really thinking about if someone's really interested in landscape gardening, then again, there is nothing to stop them delivering content to landscape gardeners anywhere in the world. Mm-hmm. But then you have professional creators or kind of more established broadcasters who in India, for example, might be trying to get the Indian diaspora in the UK or Australia or US. And I know from my time at Star TV, trying to get a channel together to deliver on DirecTV or a traditional cable platform is expensive, number one. I mean, the idea of kind of delivering it is expensive. You then have to try and find those audiences, and you might be talking about 1 million viewers in the US. Well, some of them are in San Francisco, some of them are in New York, some of them are in other places, and how do you really find them? Mm-hmm. Do you have to get into multiple cable operators, and how does that really work? And so I think that the potential for both individual contributors or individual content creators and more established ones is really taking advantage of that global platform.
It almost seems like, and we were listening to the previous session, it almost seems like if you have a big creative idea, then it is kind of a boundaryless world where you can distribute. And YouTube plays a very important role because it's present globally. How do you then advise producers and content creators to leverage YouTube's scale?
Well, look, I think that there's a number of options available. I mean, what we're trying to do at YouTube is really to put the tools in the hands of the content creators themselves. So if you want to have geographic restrictions on particular content because of rights issues, that's possible. If you want to upload your content and allow people to parody it, we give you the tools through Content ID to be able to either block someone using that content. Number two, sort of track it to just see what's happening with that content. And number three, monetize it. I mean, Sai monetizes all of the parody videos. So any money that comes from advertising around a parody video using Sai's song, he gets the money for it. So it's irrelevant to him whether people actually watch his official video or a parody video. And that's where a number of content partners are really sort of ending up. I think the other thing about YouTube is beyond the global scale of it. It's really trying to reach audiences that frankly don't watch traditional television very much, or not as much as before. And I mean, I come from a very traditional TV background at Star TV and B-Sky B before that, and I was the only mother in the school that would ask their kids to watch television, right? I remember coming home a number of times and the kids were turning off the TV. What are you doing? And they said, well, there's nothing on. And they were going to the PlayStation or going to YouTube. And I went, no, TV good, right? But there's not much you can do to sort of change kids' behaviour, right? I mean, I could tell them all I liked about you should be watching TV, but I like the stuff here, or it's not on now, or I don't like this show. And so I sort of grew up in an age where you had 3 broadcast networks, and on Saturday afternoon, I remember we started with cartoons for about 3 hours, and then it went into worldwide wrestling, and then it went into an Elvis movie, and then it went into something else. I just used to watch for 8 hours straight. It didn't matter. But I didn't have choices, right? And kids have a lot more choices now, and they want to watch on mobile devices, right? They want to watch on their tablet, and their ability to watch broadcast television on pay TV on those other devices is kind of limited.
I mean, there are 2 key things that really popped into my mind when you're talking about the traditional TV environment, which I grew up as well. The first one is you mentioned the point about audiences now have choices. And I had a recent experience leveraging the YouTube scale in Malaysia for one of our clients, Samsung, where the Olympics was streamed live via YouTube, and we leveraged a YouTube platform instead of the conventional space. Can you talk to us a little bit more about the choice versus convenience? Because I thought ESPN had 20 channels, so there was enough choice. So why were people still using YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we've found is the convenience factor of being where you want it at any point in time. I mean, if I'm a subscriber, as I am, to the sports channels at home, if I'm at work, I can't get access to them. So if I want to watch the Olympics on one of the sports channels, I can't. So that's where YouTube really sort of comes to the fore. We're finding that about 1/4 of all YouTube views are actually on a mobile device. So the other thing is just having it in your hand. So when you hear about a recent event and you can go and immediately check it and watch the video, then that's pretty compelling. I certainly know from my kids, they're very impatient. They want to see it. Whenever they hear about something, they want to see it now. They're not big on deferred gratification.
Very interesting. Historically, when Olympics was, the rights for Olympics were ever given, it was essentially given to the largest reach local terrestrial stations because they were giving the maximum coverage. And I think with this year's Olympics, a lot of things changed by the way they licensed content and the way they allowed producers and content distributors to distribute it was significantly different. And I think, to your point, convenience and choice were a very powerful combination. The other question I had, which when you referred to the Sai Gangnam Style video, is in a way, it seems to be that the content kind of got the traction also due to the parody. In a way, he actually created content and gave it away to the audiences to play with. That, I think, is a raw nerve for content producers.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, look, again, from my time at Star TV, the idea that you would give up control of your content is really against everything that content producers kind of think about, right? It is this sense of, I know what's best. I've spent all this time making it and editing it, and giving that power to the consumer is pretty threatening, right? But at the same time, I mean, one of the things that we've found is that that's the way to drive engagement. That's the way to drive sampling. That's the way to drive catch-up. And allowing, within limits, the ability to try and embrace that rather than build up walls against that is really the key thing. But I do understand from my background that that's not something that you normally give up lightly. I mean, one of the things that we've found is the ability of the movie trailers to really drive cinema buying and going to the cinema and being able to sample the film trailer in advance of going to the movies is just hugely powerful. I don't think there's any movie that's released that doesn't have a trailer up on YouTube in advance of that, so that you get to really build up sort of marketing around the actual release.
Very interesting. One of the things we have seen is, especially on television, a lot of producers have now started to cross-pollinate content across multiple screens. What do you think is their reason for doing it? What's actually happening in the ecosystem?
Well, I guess, I mean, one of the things that we've found is that the way that YouTube is really consumed, it very much appears to be additive rather than taking away from a particular viewing experience. And as you guys know, how many times have you been sitting in front of the big screen TV and had your tablet, iPad on your lap and the phone there, and so you're doing multiple things at once. And I think one of the things that we've certainly found is that there is a lot of kind of multi-screen viewing at the same time, and so the ability of you to almost have kind of complementary TV and YouTube experience as well to drive people to, whether it's going to see sort of more information on a particular ad, or whether it's some more content that's available from the channel available online as well. So we see it as being very complementary, even when you're in the home.
If I can just take a step back and go back to the audience, and interestingly, the question has come, right?
Well,
good timing.
I think YouTube made the TV star of Psy. I mean, every time I turn on TV, Psy seems to be there. And I can't imagine, and same with Justin Bieber, right? I mean, these guys came from YouTube. Would they have been discovered beforehand? I'm not so sure, right? How would you find a teenager in Canada?
Exactly. The interesting question from here is if YouTube really killed TV, or YouTube fueled TV, and the role that online video platforms play today in the overall ecosystem, whether it is audience or the advertisers or the content creators. Can you talk to us about how it has democratized the entire ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's the kind of clear trend that we're seeing is just the amount of content that's being uploaded is extraordinary. So when I first started at Google a couple of years ago, one of the figures I was quoting was 48 hours of content being uploaded every minute. Now it's 72 hours of content being uploaded every minute. It's just a vast quantity of content being uploaded everywhere in the world. And I think the challenge for our users and for us is to allow people to find it. I mean, we're a search company, but even knowing what to search for is not straightforward. So I think one of the things that we've really done over the last 12 months or so is really allow our content partners to create channels, to really have their own branded environment, so that you can subscribe to that channel by essentially sort of pressing the subscribe button, so that when I log in, all my channels are there. It'll give me access to all the current videos that have been uploaded since I last checked YouTube. And I think, I mean, one of the things that we've been trying to innovate around is the original way in which people accessed YouTube was sharing a link around, right? So you got an email or a Facebook link of a particular video, so it might be Psy or whatever else. But now I can subscribe to the Psy channel. I can see what's been uploaded there. I can subscribe to, as I do, the ABC network in Australia, so I'll get to see some Australian content that's been uploaded by the news channel in Australia. So for me, it's being able to customise my own set of experiences. And that, of course, I can see anything that I want above and beyond that, but really having a home environment that's customised to me, and I can drop channels or add them as I want. And I think we're certainly finding that kind of branded channel experience is really having a much better effect on our content producers as they try and create those environments for their viewers.
Can you share some statistics with us on in Asia? What kind of numbers are there with regards to online video viewing? And you mentioned that 30-40% of the video views happen from mobile devices. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think for us, we're really sort of only scratching the surface of YouTube in Asia. We've just recently announced, I think 19 or 20 original new channels for Japan. So we've tied up with 13 different Japanese content producers, including the 3 major broadcast networks, and they will have their own branded channels where we're helping to establish those and fund those. I think one thing that we're very keen on is really creating an ecosystem where we're really encouraging our partners to have more local content. Because if you're going to Indonesian YouTube, you pretty much want to see things in Bahasa. You really want to see it, I mean, in the same way that TV viewing is pretty much in local language. As we're launching local versions of YouTube in a number of markets across Asia, the thing that's most important is to have the ecosystem created where people can watch programming that's relevant to them, and also watch Sci. But there's nothing worse than going on to YouTube where it's stuff that I don't want to see. So what we're trying to do is customize those home screens and have as much local content created as possible. So every time we launch a local version of YouTube, we very much reach out to key content producers in those markets in order to create an ecosystem where when people go onto YouTube, they'll find something that's relevant.
And online video is a huge habit in Asia now?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and actually even in markets where you think of connectivity issues as being very difficult. So I keep using Indonesia as an example, but I remember going to see one of our partners. I sort of very much work on the side of the large telco partners and online partners, and they were telling me that half of their traffic was going to YouTube, and this was before we launched a local version of YouTube, number one, and this was where they really didn't have 3G, so the capacity of the network and the experience obviously wasn't ideal, but people are still consuming incredible amount of video content. I think the big trend is really the move online from text to video. When you think about sort of the beginning of video, so the beginning of the internet, it was all text-based. And increasingly it's now video-based. I'm not so sure that my kids will ever read anything on the internet either, which might be a problem. But the idea of kind of consumption is all around video.
How can film producers and content creators engage with YouTube or Google to fuel their content?
I mean, I think there's kind of a few areas where we're really encouraging people to come and talk to us. One is around creation of channels. So you may have a lot of videos on YouTube, but trying to create some channel experiences where you can really have much deeper engagement with viewers, I think is kind of one way of trying to engage. I think the other is experiment. I have a number of questions always from partners where they say, well, we're worried that this is going to cannibalise our viewership on free TV or other methods of distribution. I mean, the first thing we say is, look, the experience that we've had with partners in the UK or in the US or in a number of markets, particularly India actually, is that it's additive, not detracting from that. And one of the things we talked about was, if you have one of the things that we've seen in a number of markets is TV viewership normally builds, right? So if you're coming into if you hear about a show when it's on episode 5, then unless you can watch episodes 1 to 4 some other way, then I don't know that you're necessarily going to get into Homeland on episode 5, right? So trying to find different ways of trying to build that audience and add to it over time, I think, is really important. Sorry, there's a question.
Internet generally, and YouTube in particular, is a vexatious area for traditional approaches to copyright. Can you report anything about the use of Creative Commons licenses to regulate copyright on YouTube in particular?
Well, I guess, I mean, one of the things that we very much do on YouTube is really try and recognise the owner of the original copyright material, and so the big innovation that we launched a few years ago is Content ID. So Content ID essentially allows anybody who has IP to give us those reference files, and we essentially scan a year's worth of video every day on YouTube against those reference files. So if you have uploaded a video and said, this is my IP, here's the reference file, let me know when there's any kind of infringing content, then we can do that. And we do that for thousands of our partners worldwide. One thing that we very much do is then give the tools to you to say, you can either block that content, you can monetize that content, or you can track that content. And again, the decision is yours about what you want to do about that content.
The copyright license known as the Creative Commons?
Yes.
Is that rule used?
I'm not aware of that, actually. I'm not aware that it's been used by our content partners, but I couldn't see. I genuinely don't know the answer to that.
The question is, when all content is available on demand, on YouTube, on every room TV, what will happen to traditional TV networks?
Well, look, I probably have a different bias than others around this, but I do think that brands and programs matter, and I think that they will continue to matter. The question is, what's going to be the delivery mechanism and what's going to be the business model associated with those brands and that programming? And I think that's where the challenge really lies for traditional TV networks. I mean, if a traditional TV network really only looks at distribution in one way and one form of business model, I think that there's going to be some challenges around that, partly because, as I said, my daughters don't watch traditional TV networks. They just don't. I'd like them to, but they don't. And so you have to really respond to the way in which audiences are really interacting with programming and with brands and with content. I think the other way to look at it is really in terms of an opportunity. So if a traditional TV network in Singapore, say, comes up with a great program, and the traditional way of distributing it was showing it in Singapore, and that's it. Now they can have a global audience for that content, and that doesn't mean that they can't just continue doing what they're doing in Singapore, but why not try and distribute that content in Malaysia and Indonesia and US and Australia and a number of other markets and try and monetize that? So we really see it as more of an opportunity for most content owners, including traditional TV networks, rather than something that's necessarily going to detract from that.
I would actually like to give an example to Michelle's point on how traditional networks benefited from YouTube. There's this content created in India recently called Satyamev Jayate. It started off with average ratings, but within 1 hour of airing on TV, they put it out on full version of the show on the internet, on YouTube. And by the time the second episode came, the audience ratings started going up, and it was kind of cross-pollinating. So to me, from an advertising agency perspective or an advertiser's perspective, the ecosystem is getting richer. There is better synergies rather than one eroding the other.
Yeah, I mean, I look at even something like advertising being content now, right? And we talked about this a little bit before, but I couldn't get over, I guess at the time of Super Bowl, one of the things that Google did on the homepage is actually have a link to the Super Bowl ads on our homepage. The viewership of Super Bowl ads globally and even in the US was greater than the number of people that watch the Super Bowl ads on traditional TV. And they were watching it as content. They weren't watching the Super Bowl, they were watching just the ads. And when you think about the opportunities around that, whether that's Old Spice just doing kind of Old Spice content, there is no programming.
There was no advertising, there was no programming, it was all content, meaningful content for the audience.
But people are going to watch it by itself, right? Not in and amongst programming.
We have a question here.
Yeah, interesting what you were just saying before about Google trying to become a platform for sort of distribution. My question is specifically, what have you found? When I think of that here, I think of Apple TV. I buy tons of TV on Apple because I can get it readily available. I want to catch up from episode 5 if I hear about a great show. It's only a couple of bucks an episode. I can watch a couple of them and figure out whether I like the show by the season. And I'm sure Google wants to become that kind of global platform to reach lots of audiences worldwide in Bahasa or in other languages. So specifically, what have been the barriers for these media producers to use Google as a platform to monetize these shows? What are some of the big barriers for them to do that? Why are they resisting that when clearly Apple has made it clear that you can sell your shows worldwide?
Yeah, look, I think we've been experimenting with a movie rental model in a number of markets. So we've started the movie rental model on YouTube in the US and in Australia, and actually doing it also through Android, through Google Play as the way of accessing that content. I think some of it is just fear. I mean, genuinely, just I'm worried about losing control. At least, kind of my perspective at Star was always that we had to own the environment in the same way that we own the channel. We owned that environment. And so some of it is kind of giving up control of that, or kind of the perception of control. And that's really why we're really trying to give a message about you own the brand environment within YouTube. You own the channels. You have control over what videos you upload, whether you take them all down. I mean, the other thing that I see as a different kind of mindset within someone like Google and more traditional TV networks is Google will experiment, and if it doesn't work, then stop doing it. And that's really the message that I give to a number of our partners, which is, look, try it. If you find that is not really working for you, try something else. I mean, the great thing about the internet is you can experiment. You can try different things in different markets. So you can say, well, in India I'm going to try this, and in US I'm going to try this, in Australia I'm going to try that. That's entirely within your control to be able to play around with things. And that's the great sort of challenge of for most people. It's the fear of the unknown, and just try it out and see what works and what doesn't. But I think you do really need to sort of slightly let go. I mean, I look at, again, the way in which my kids interact with programming and content is very different to the way I passively sat there and just watched 8 hours at a time of broadcast TV.
Do we have another question here?
first, I'd like to know, do you have a certain guideline for a content uploader, content network? People, like how do they get paid? Like, for example, for 100,000 views, how much do they get paid? And does everyone knows about that? Is it being transparent? Do you pay them equally, or I just want to know the guideline. And the second question is, I'd like to know more about Google Movie.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay, so on the first side, it can't, and I know this is a bad answer, but it depends, right? So obviously, the advertising rates that we can charge for YouTube content in the US is very different to Indonesia, and so it really depends on the kind of viewership you have, where the viewership is, and so it's really hard to have a sort of a hard and fast rule. What we very much, and this is kind of, we have different categories of partners, where some of our larger partners who will require a lot more sort of hand-holding in terms of uploading the content, really getting a lot of their library content available, is very different to somebody uploading it themselves and essentially entering into an online agreement with us on a revenue share arrangement. So again, it depends about whether you're a large partner or whether you're a partner that will operate on a self-service kind of basis. I think one of the things that we're certainly finding is that the kind of advertising that's really working on YouTube is an advertising that we developed called TrueView, which essentially gives you entire control on skipping the ads. So one of the things that we were very, very keen on is making sure that the people that watch the ads really want to watch the ads. So we think that ultimately you can charge more when a viewer is actually choosing not to skip the ad. And I think about 65% of the ads on YouTube are skippable. And you'll see it very often where it'll say, you can skip this ad if you press here. Well, we find that the advertiser only has to pay for us when someone's watching the ad all the way through. We can, if we're serving up a particular ad to you and you haven't clicked on it for a while, then we'll try another ad and see whether that's more engaging to you. So the ability to have personalized ads, or at least ads that change, and we can try and encourage you to try a different ad instead of the one that you keep skipping. So for us, it's more around experimenting and being able to have advertising that really delivers for our advertiser partners as well. Then on the movie side, as I said, we're really starting out in terms of experimenting with movie rentals. We've started out in the US and in Australia, and I think the UK and a number of other markets, and we'll see how we develop that. I think we really see that the vision and future for YouTube is to be a video platform for all kinds of content, whether that's full-length movies or my daughter's ballet performance. And so being able to have a video platform that can do both things, I think, is kind of the ultimate aim.
We have one question here, and we have about a minute. Mm-hmm. Before we get to that, just to clarify a question, does Google pay producers or content creators based on content, mm-hmm, or number of views their content gets? What is the philosophy here?
Yeah, so we very much do. We have a revenue share model. So to the extent that we can generate advertising from our kind of great relationships with the Samsungs or Toyotas or large brands, as well as the torso and long tail advertisers that we have globally, we operate on a revenue share basis with our content partners. So we very much any revenue we get in, we pass through on a revenue share basis with our content partners. So it is purely based on revenue.
Okay, thank you. Because in the conventional world, the distributor or platform buys content,
Yes.
irrespective of making
Yes.
money or
Yes.
profiting from it or making a loss.
Yes.
In this case, the
It's-
content owner is making money only if there is
Yeah,
audience coming in.
very similar to our arrangements with partners on our other advertising products. So AdSense, for example, that's now all done on a revenue share basis. So if my team signs a deal with Rakuten in Japan or News International or kind of News Corp in Australia, and we place advertising on their site, we share the revenue with them for bringing that advertiser to their site.
Thank you for that clarification, Michelle. This is the last one question. I think our time's up, so we'll take this.
Yeah, so the trends to look for on YouTube, I mean, I think one is just the usage is going crazy. And so whatever we looked at in terms of usage on a country-by-country basis, whether it's content being uploaded, it's just the explosion of both content and viewership is just massive. And I always get surprised about the volume of content that's continually sort of available. So, and I think the other thing is obviously, and this is your job, to bring more advertisers onto the platform. So we're finding that a number of kind of key advertisers keep coming back, but we do have to broaden it out to get more advertisers onto YouTube. No doubt about it. We're finding some very key, very large partners who, like Samsung, who are very happy with their relationship with us on YouTube. But as I said, I really feel like, particularly in Asia, we're just getting started in terms of both getting more local content available on YouTube in each of these countries, but also there's no point in having the content and the users if we can't bring the money as well. So we're very much trying to do three things at once, which is get the content, get people to use it, and bring the advertisers that follow the users.
I think one of the key differences from an advertiser perspective who has been underwriting the ecosystem, if you will, is that they're not in it for media, they're in it for the audience, and they pay for the audience. And that's a huge shift that is happening in the system where people are paying for how many audiences you're giving. In the past, because it was a unidimensional data flow, broadcaster pushing content, you were not sure whether you're getting audiences. So you were paying for content / airtime. And now from an advertiser perspective, we have the opportunity, because of the return path data, the ecosystem, that we're buying audiences, and we aggregate one at a time and pay for an audience one at a time. I think that's a huge trend shift. And when content creators are looking at creating content, from an advertiser's perspective and an agency's perspective, if you can create it in multiple format, multiple screens, which are able to talk to each other and cross-pollinate the overall system, I think there will be success for all stakeholders.
We're out of time?
We're out of time. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.